everybody, and welcome. Whoa, watch out. Welcome to our second installment of the workshop. This time I got Alicia on faster. So steadily getting better at this technology thing.
Yes, we are.
Yeah, you look like you got a lot of sun.
Yeah, sorry. And you can probably smell me through the. It's really hot and I'm really sweaty, but it's okay. So I just got done with practice and just got home not that long ago. So
busy.
Yeah, it's 97 degrees here today.
Mind blown. That's like 17 degrees hotter than it is in Florida right now.
That never happens.
No. Figures, right?
Right.
So today I'm talking about deliberate practice. So talking about ways to make sure that your practice plan specifically is very purposeful and everything you do has a reason and not wasting any time or energy. So it's an awesome concept. We were talking a little bit earlier about how it's different from the 10,000 hour rule, where if you put in your 10,000 hours, you become an expert. Sounds pretty straightforward, but really it has to be 10,000 hours of this deliberate practice. So let's dive on in. So we're going to talk about our, what do you call this, process, RLGA. And let me show it to you guys. Right. Oh my gosh, if I don't knock you down. So we start with relate, which is when you focus on their performance and how it relates to the topic you want to talk about. So if we're talking about confidence at today's practice, are they confident? How confident are they? And what does that look like to them? Learn, we're talking about more fundamentals, these isolated drills like skills drills, and for infield, short hops, outfield, drop steps, pitching, spins, all these things that are the very small drills that you need to do. Grow is when you start adding in situations, and we call this blocked, where you know what's happening, you know what to expect. Right. I'm running a double play. Whereas in the next section, adapt, it's random situations. So more game-like of, hey, these are my options, I'm prepared, and then I react. So let's just go one by one about how to actually plug them into the practice plan. So for relate, what are some ways, Alicia, that you help the girls connect to the theme of the week?
Sure. So basically you just kind of modeled my practice plan too. So in the beginning of every practice, we sometimes I'll tell them ahead of time if they need to listen to a podcast or a TED Talk to either listen to it the night before, or if it's short, we will actually do it in practice. So I say, hey, bring your phones, your headphones, things like that. We have a lot of articles to read, just some sort of thing that is tied to the word or theme of the week. So recently I did a TED Talk, and I was, for the life of me, for the last 10 minutes trying to find what it was called before this, but I can't. But anyway, it's usually a very short, TED Talk or podcast that I would have them do at practice. If it's a longer thing, then I would have them do it the night before. Around confidence, around positive self-talk. I think the TED Talk that we listened to was wrapped around positive self-talk. So then we have a group session, and we always talk about it. So relating, again, something, it's just another way for them to relate to the piece that we're talking about. It's also really good, in my experiences, for everyone to share their thoughts and opinions. And I think that helps everyone kind of connect on the team and help me understand what is their level of understanding, what are they really pulling out of this. Sometimes if they have a homework assignment, for example, of listening to a longer one, I'll have them text me, what did you get out of it? So some of them get a lot more than others, but that's when you kind of have to prompt those conversations, and you and I have been a part of those for a lot of the season. So that's really that relate piece, and that's always the first 10 to 15 minutes of practice, but again, built in the practice plan.
Yeah, and that's huge because, like we've said, and we'll keep saying it, you got to plan it in. Otherwise, a million other things take over.
It's true.
How do you feel that has helped get your girls like zoned in for practice? Because like they've got a million things going on in their heads. They're coming straight from school or something else. They've got things after. Have you found that it's helped them kind of zone in and get in practice mode?
I do. In the beginning, they always, do the warm up laps and they stretch, and they're allowed to talk about whatever they want to as soon as when they're doing that. They can talk about what happened at school or anything else that's not softball related. It's totally fine. But once then they go into their throwing routine and warm up throwing. Then we go to notebooks. That's kind of what we've just kind of transitioned to because they like that transition from a warm up right into throwing. Um, Once they start throwing, they're not supposed to be talking about things outside of softball, and they're really supposed to be focused. So that's the start of being focused on why we're there and what we're doing. Um, and then we come into the dugout and we have that conversation. So they're already kind of focused mentally, I guess. And I think that's kind of important because I have noticed at times, for example, if somewhere in practice where we do a warm-up throw and then come in and the throws are all over the field, it's because their warm-up wasn't focused. So I like to do it that way. So that focus has already kind of been kind of narrowed in, I guess.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting because they like the theme of the week. What's the theme of the week and what are we working on? So, I think just with the experience of going over it, time and time again, I think that really does help them focus on that one thing because then the next step that we work on, the learn part is always the next step of practice as well.
Absolutely. And like you said, this takes maybe 10, 15 minutes, but setting that tone is huge for really getting everything out of practice that you need to do.
It is because if you go in and do, for example, team defense and the throws are all over the place and they're not filled, then really, like it's not deliberate, it's not productive, it's not helpful, and then it just cascades into not a productive practice.
And every coach hates that. Fantastic. So all that for just the first 10 minutes of practice. Next, let's talk about the learn piece. So different each day, different during specific parts of the season, but this is typically where you work on those fine motor skills and really focusing in on the little things. So what are some ways that you've done that?
We usually, not always, but almost always break into infield and outfield. So we'll have 3 infield coaches and 2 outfield coaches. Again, I know that we have a luxury of 5, and I know that's not doesn't happen often. But even if you have just 2 coaches, you could split them. You can be creative with how you split them. You could do right side, left side. You could do infield, outfield. You can do corners, middle, and the outfielders can go hit something. Just as long as there's that whatever you are working on is very specific to. So for example, outfielders, it's always anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes. It just kind of depends, usually longer earlier in the season, or if there's something that we really need to focus on for an opponent or that we're introducing kind of new, then we will definitely focus on that more, maybe 20 minutes. So it's the want defense for corners, and while they're doing that, they're working with catchers and corners. Then I'll have the middle infield do something, I'll get out the cones and we work on drop steps, for example. Outfield works on fly balls and communication. Obviously, you can come up with a whole host of things that you would focus on, but those are always those little, footwork drills. We do a lot of footwork drills and quick throws or something like that. But it's very focused for a very short period of time in group specific.
And I like the small group aspect because when you're working on all these things and it's specific to each person, I think it's really important that they get a ton of feedback in this stage. So you have to split them up. I don't care how good you are, if everyone's doing the same thing in front of you at once, it's so hard to focus in and figure out who's doing what and how to help them.
It is. And if you have an experienced player or two, you're short on coaches, you can honestly have them either demonstrate or help out. I have a lot of different seniors, for example, that could really just they're very good at communicating the drills as well or demonstrating the drills. So I think that part's important. It's all instructional. It's all fundamental. And that's where you want to make sure that if you can, and you remember, that's the part that's sometimes difficult to remember, to tie those things that we just talked about, right? You want to just make sure that you're focused, you're confident. Repetition and fundamentals often translates to confidence. So making sure that they're making that tie.
Absolutely. Love that. So all this should come relatively easy to them, as far as at least mentally, because it's just working on muscle memory. But in the grow piece, we need to level up the difficulty, and you can do that multiple ways. You can add a time limit. You can do a point system. You can add consequences. What were some of the more effective ways for your girls for upping that level of pressure?
Sure. So I will do a lot of either team defense or double fungo or some sort of constant movement and a lot of quick repetition, but now it's involving the whole team. So if we do like a double fungo, it's you split this field in half and you have coaches hitting to one half of the field very rapid and quickly. If a ball's missed, the whole team has to drop and do 10 push-ups, for example. If they're not talking on the field, then we will stop and the whole team has to do 10 push-ups or burpees or some sort of consequence. So you want to push the consequence and not the punishment. So that's really what we focused on as well. Also, sometimes with team defense, it's the same thing. If it's a mental error and you're covering the wrong base or didn't cover the base at all, stop and give me 10 push-ups. I mean, that's really what we focus on when we ramp up the pressure a little bit. We usually speed it up. If you speed up the game a little bit faster in practice than what it is in an actual game, that helps, right? But if they make a mental error, that's usually when we have to stop and do the consequence. Almost always, it's because they didn't talk it through first and say where they're supposed to go or talk. I mean, I'm very big on talking. They should be constantly running their mouth. One, it helps you focus on what you're supposed to focus on and not everything else. And two, it reiterates where I'm going. I'm communicating if I'm a third baseman, I'm communicating to the shortstop, whether I'm covering a bunt in or out. And if they don't know that, or they misinterpret where they're supposed to go, it's because they probably didn't open up their mouth and talk about it. So those are the consequences you have for not communicating on the field. But we've even ramped up it with, say, adding baseballs and hitting them baseballs, changing it up, because that's different. So some will have a bucket full of everything, and they won't know what we're hitting. So it'll be a
good one.
Softball, a tennis ball, or one of those really little softballs, or a baseball. And you have to react and be quick, because that's what happens in a game. So that gives them that quick think on your feet type aspect. And when things change, you have to be ready for it.
Love that. And I love the distinction, we talked about this before, between punishment and consequences. You have to have consequences to get them to focus in, and B, just help them remember which things are within their control. So it becomes a punishment when it's something they had no control over. So if the ball takes a bad hop and you make the kid do burpees, that's a punishment. They're like, what the heck? It doesn't sink in. It doesn't help them. Or if you're making them run because you're frustrated with them without actually telling them why you're frustrated, that's a punishment. But if you're really frustrated because they're not focusing and you talk that through, it's a consequence.
Very true. Very true.
I think nowadays I almost pull back too much on consequences. But I think we need to keep that accountability up. And the girls appreciate it. Of course, they're going to get snarky and grumpy in the moment. But afterwards, maybe after the season, maybe 5 years down the road, they know that was what they needed.
For sure. And if you constantly do the punishment, they will turn negative. It'll be negative thoughts. They'll start to be afraid to make a mistake and not be fearless and go after the ball, for example, when they should, because they don't want to make a mistake. And that's also the consequence, I guess, of punishments sometimes.
Yeah.
I mean, there's times to punish, obviously. If they are not hustling or talking and it's the expectation of things that they can control and it's just not working, then sometimes you just need to say, drop your gloves and go run, because they're not talking. That's a punishment.
I still think that's not a punishment. I think that is your consequence for not getting your act together.
Fair enough.
All right. I could go on about that forever. Let's move on to the adapt piece. So the difference here is that situations are mixed, they're unexpected, and it is challenging the girls to make decisions and stick with them. And this can be fun, but it needs to be very focused as well. So like when we say game, it's not just the fun side of like, oh, let's have teams and hit off a tee, and it like make that competitive. And that is a fantastic adapt drill. So what are some things you guys have done that have worked on that piece?
A couple of different things. One, I can think of one example of we call it the 100-point game, where you have, I think we start off with maybe 20 minutes. It's a running clock, and you break the team up into, for our team, we can make 3 teams. Obviously, you could always do 2, but you have to have positions filled on defense, and then the other team is hitting, and they have to soft toss to their teammates. They're all competing against the clock, but they're also competing with each other, but also against the clock. And so The offensive team, they soft toss, they hit the ball. Defense has to play defense normally, but offense, they get 1 point for every base that they get. So obviously, you have to get to 100 points before 20 minutes. So you put them in these situations and you just give them the rules at the beginning, and then you say go. So they have to, in the middle of the game, figure out how to be more efficient with their time. I've noticed things like all of a sudden they start figuring out that they should yell last batter, because they only bat one time through before they switch teams. They will do something like yell last batter so the other team is ready quicker to come back in. They will make sure that the catcher is batting first so she can get ready with the equipment, last or second, and be ready to jump right back in. Mm-hmm. They constantly are trying to adapt and figure out ways to be more efficient. Mm-hmm. All along, the clock is running. So that would be one example. Mm-hmm. Let's see. Another example would just be team defense, and asking my runners that are running for the defense to do things that don't make sense. Mm-hmm. Take the extra base, even though if you're out. Do a delayed steal, something that isn't just, okay, run around one, hit the ground ball, throw it a two. So if they're constantly just in that when they're not thinking, and it just becomes something where it's just where they always automatically go to two, but wait, the runner's actually trying to go to three, at least that gives them that element of surprise. Mm-hmm. Because crazy things happen in a game. So I want mm-hmm. them to make decisions quickly. I always tell them I'd rather have you make a decision quickly and be wrong in practice than hesitate and be right. Because I want mm-hmm. them to just make the decisions quickly and get comfortable with that. And usually when they get comfortable with that, then it takes time. Sometimes it took my catcher almost 2 years to feel comfortable with calling out relays. She was mm-hmm. afraid that she was not calling out the right base. Mm-hmm. I said, whatever your gut says, 99 times out of 100 is probably right. So just go with your gut, do it quickly. And then, so in those situations, we're asking them constantly to make decisions quickly.
Mm-hmm. I love that. So you can see the difference as you go through the amount of mental work it takes. And I liked this model because it gets more difficult as you go on, which is just like the game. Everything's easy inning one, or it's game one versus game two. So I think this is a really good model for preparing them for game day. So before we move on, I want to go through and show you guys, go here, an example. I guess, outline of what we could do. So in the top piece up here, your relate piece, go over the practice plan and tell them what you're going to work on, how it relates to the topic. So if you chose a video, videos are the best because it really gets them like zoned in and they pay attention. Quotes are good, but they're sometimes a little short-lived. And then we did goal buddies. So if you pair them up with someone, you can rotate it each week. You can pair them with someone they're close with, someone they're not close with. You can be strategic about it, but getting them to set goals based on that topic is another great way of getting them focused in and really deliberate. And then going into the learn piece, like my example was stations. Same idea as splitting, just making sure you're getting smaller groups of girls together. And then also working in that mental skill. So the example I have, you can go to the page and you can link to our, I guess it's a Google sheet. And the example on there is all about routines. So maybe in these stations, you're doing your pre-pitch routine for everything from defense to offense. So if it's a bunt station, what's your routine before you bunt? Like, don't just go up there and square 3 pitches in a row and hold your bat out there. Go through the same process. If you're on defense, even if you're just getting, quote unquote, getting reps, go through your routine each time. So you're practicing that at every station. And then below that, the grow piece is that challenge. So my example is defensive stations. You can tell Alicia and I are both defensive minded. But maybe infield is running for the outfielders first, and their situation is to get the runners at home. So they have to work on their routine before that play each time and how to adjust in between. Maybe they made a mistake, they made a throwing error. How are they going to adjust in between and get ready again? Maybe they got her out and they're excited. How do they get back down and get back into it again? And then finally, that adapt piece, play a game, really challenge them and see what they can do. And then at the very end, I always like a recap. You should be giving them feedback throughout the practice, so you don't save it all till the end because then they can't adjust. But talk about the wins, what went well, what they learned, what they got from it, and it really just helps them be reminded of all the stuff they just covered, because even in that same day, we tend to forget what we did at the beginning. Heck, in just 10 reps. It's just how our brains work, paying attention to the last one, which is another drill we can talk about another time. Um, but are there any other examples before? I think I got everything on here. Before we head out for implementing mental skills directly into these sections.
The only other thing I can, I guess, kind of think of, we talked a little bit on our podcast, would just be like, for example, if you're doing something like a self-talk, week. We talked, I think self-talk was, I think 1 or 2 weeks that we did, just trying to work on that confidence part, is that you can actually have your kids say out loud what they're saying, kind of tally it, record it, talk about how important it is. I like to use this example sometimes when I was working with one of my hitters and she was really struggling, and I just said, I need you to say, I'm a good hitter.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a good hitter. No, I mean, say it like you mean it. I'm a good hitter. After every pitch that came in front toss, say it out loud again. I'm a good hitter. I'm a good hitter. Every time before the pitch came, and she started connecting, and then they became harder line drives, and her body, her shoulders were slumped, and they started to kind of be a little stronger. I mean, her physical body, like, demeanor changed, and she said it louder, and she said it more confidently. So I literally watched it before my eyes within like 10 times of her just saying, I'm a good hitter. So, I mean, those are types of things that you can, as teammates, as coaches, you can kind of work through. That would be one example of many where positive self-talk is really important, and to actually have them say it out loud.
Absolutely. And I think the reason it worked so well right then was because it was timely and it was on her mind and it was specific to what she needed. And I think when you have the plan ahead of time, you don't have to worry about the practice plan because you've already got it set out. It frees your coaching brain to notice she needs something out loud, or this is what she needs, and to be able to connect with your players that way.
Yeah, very good point.
Because I found many a time I was real good at keeping track of my times and I had no clue what each person did at the end of the practice.
Right.
Managing your brain. Well, that is all I've got. Can you think of anything else I missed?
I can't. I think that's everything we said we're going to cover.
All right. Worst case, we'll add it to the post at the end. So as a reminder, you can go to the link, I believe it's to the side or below, after this video is done, and you can go see the full write-up and also get access to the template we created with that relate, learn, grow, adapt process for practice plan. So I've got an example on there that you can look at, and then also sheets where you can fill it in. Oh, I remembered what we forgot. The drill bank.
Drill bank.
So to be delivered at practice, we need to plug things in, and there are just lots of times, especially mid to late season, where I can't think of a new drill. I'm sick of all the same things. So we both talked about how having a drill bank, even if you just brainstorm at the beginning of season for 20 minutes with your assistants and just add these things in, when you get stuck or you're like, wow, we need something, you can go to that drill bank and just plug it in, as opposed to trying to rack your brain and think of all these things.
It's a very, very good point. We also have, if there's something very specific we're like, okay, we needed either, like, something comes up during a season and we really focus on that. What's a really good drill for fixing that or working on that? And that's, I mean, you can Google it, and you can find, there's so many sources out there, and that's definitely has been a lifesaver for us this year, is to have a drill bank ahead of time, but constantly adding to it too.
Absolutely. There's tons out there. Again, Google. Find it on YouTube.
Where our Google Drive is where we, as coaches, have everything. So we just dump it in there, and then the players. So if we need to share something with the players, it's where we put it. If the coaches can just kind of use that space to share ideas as well.
We will definitely go over more of a tutorial for Google Drive as well. because everyone should use it. It's so convenient. But if we have any questions, now is the time. Otherwise, leave them below in the comments. And coming up tomorrow, we don't get Alicia live because she has this thing called a game. But good luck to you tomorrow, by the way. So we'll be thinking of her, and I'm going to make her record her section right after this. So we'll still get to hear from her, but we'll be talking about how to really connect with your girls and get to know them on a deep level, but still not going too far as like you don't want to be buddy, but you need to get to know these girls. So we'll talk about specific ways to get to know them and what makes them tick and how to best coach them. So that's all I got. And thank you everybody for joining us. And Alicia, I will talk to you soon.
Sounds good. Bye.
Talk to you later, guys.